Hello and good morning. My name is Ron Miscavige. This is Life After Scientology. And that little cut of music you heard was a song that I did in 1974 called Barnum and Gumbo. So let me get a little business out of the way before we get started, because I got a great guest on for us today, and you're going to very much enjoy this, so please stay tuned. Now, first of all, we don't have a sponsor. I got to take a drink here. Hang on. We do not have a sponsor. As a matter of fact, I don't want one. And I'll tell you why I don't want one. I don't want anybody telling me what I can or can't do. This is a platform where you come on, and if you have a story and you want to tell it and you're invited by me, you can come on, you can tell your story. You will not be, the interview will not be edited. You won't be thrown under the bus. I'll treat you with respect. Unless you're an anarchist, you're not going to get on the program to begin with. But if you have a decent story, you can come on here and tell it. And this is a free platform where you're free to tell your story so you can get it out to your public. And in order to do this, we have what we call a Patreon system, where you can go on my website, therealronmiscavige.com, and look up Patreon, and then you can donate per month any amount you'd like to, whether it's $1 or $2 or $5 or $10 or $100. And so what I'd like to do right now, and this is to help us keep going, because we're on our own dime, that is, so you can contribute to the ongoingness of this program. So I'd like to acknowledge some people who did this, and one of them is Michelle Clark. That was for $2. Michelle, thank you very much. It's very much appreciated. And then a person called Simply Me, great handle, very creative. $2. Thank you very much, Simply Me. And then we have one who I was in communication with on the email, because it was a sizable one. And this is a gentleman who would prefer not to be named. And so I'm going to call him anonymous. And it was for the generous contribution of $200. And I will tell you, my friend, I appreciate that from the bottom of my heart. So thank you very much, anonymous. You know who you are. So without any further commercials, let's get started. And as I say, I have a special guest on. And this is a gentleman from Clearwater, Florida, who has quite a story to tell. Without any further words, please welcome Willy Rice.
Ron, it's great to be here with you. It's been looking forward to this. It's an honor to meet you through this medium. And I appreciate your voice, your platform, what you're doing to get the truth out.
Okay, so Willy, just to orient our audience as to who you are and what you do, because then we're going to get into the meat of the program. Why don't you give us a little background, like where you were born and how you started being a pastor? And the church that you are affiliated with is the Calvary Baptist Church of Clearwater, which, per my knowledge, is the oldest church in Clearwater, Florida. As a matter of fact, you mentioned just in our talk a little bit ago, before we were on the air, that you're actually older than the city of Clearwater. So let's give us a little background there.
Well, thanks, Ron. It's, as I said, an honor to be with you. I'm a Baptist pastor. That's what I am. I've been doing that since I was 20 years old, and so over 30 years now. And Calvary is a church I was a kid at. I was a teenager here, and it is, so far as we know, it's the oldest church in Clearwater. I mean, it was legally incorporated as the First Baptist Church of Clearwater. And in the 1920s, it began to be known as Calvary Baptist Church. And for many years, it was right downtown Clearwater. People who live here may remember right next to City Hall was an old, very historic building. And we relocated out on the other side of Clearwater back in 2005. But this is my home. I was born in Tampa, raised in Pinellas County. So I'm kind of a, Tampa Bay, Florida kid. And it's been a joy to come back and pastor this church that I love so much.
That's great, man. By the way, are you a Buccaneers fan?
I'm more of a college fan, and I grew up a Florida Gator fan. So that's my great passion. But certainly we want the Bucs to do well. I like the Bucs. I'm just a little more entertained by college football, I think, than the NFL.
These days, I'm kind of swinging toward the college. The couple things the pros do, I'm not necessarily in favor of, but
I
I'm
just
not going to get
I
into
enjoy the emotion and the excitement, the tradition of the college game, but
yeah.
we haven't had a very good run here the last few years. So hopefully things will turn around for the Gators.
Yeah, but actually, for in the long run, though, I mean, you're not backing up a bad team. These are
they've had some great success. We've had a lot of fun. So hopefully more fun to come.
Okay, so now let's get down to what we're going to talk about today, and that is this. You went kind of head to head with the Church of Scientology, didn't you?
Well, yeah, and it really wasn't anything that we intended to do or set out to do. Calvary has, I've been told, and I don't see such lists, but I've been told that Calvary was on the original enemies list back in the 1970s when I was a kid. But Calvary has always been known as a strong, biblically believing, Bible believing church, biblically based church. And its leaders have occasionally spoken out about Scientology when they first crept into Clearwater. And so I can remember, even as a teenager, them having seminars to help educate people, and it be a little bit controversial. When I became the pastor, it's just it's part of the landscape here in Clearwater. You know that you're going to have questions about Scientology. People are going to ask about it. It's just part of our context. So in the course of my ministry, occasionally it comes up, and then it kind of went to a whole nother level about a year or so ago and got a lot of attention and so forth.
Well, now you used a phrase that I like, and you said they crept into Clearwater, and you're right about that. They come in under the false premises, didn't they?
They did. They came in the 1970s under a false name, which they often bought property and operated under a false name. I think it was the United Churches of Florida. And of course, there is no such organization. But they bought up the hotel, the Fort Harrison Hotel there in downtown Clearwater, which most southern towns, I guess any town, has a kind of an older downtown hotel that had once been the big hotel. And a lot of times they've fallen into disrepair. Well, they bought the Fort Harrison, renovated. It's now their flag, kind of, I guess, one of their world headquarters anyway. And it literally was catty corner. I mean, like a block over and a block down to where Calvary Baptist Church was all those years. So we were almost neighbors. I mean, when we went to church, you would park and walk by the building, the flag building, the Scientology building. So it's a presence in downtown Clearwater for certain.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, unfortunately, or whatever you want to say, I was part of that. I was a Kool-Aid drinking, card carrying Scientologist for 42 years, my friend. And I remember going there for services, and it was completely secretive. You were briefed on, you're there with the United Churches, and if anybody questioned you, and you weren't to talk to anybody about what you're doing there. It just undercover stuff that the reason they came on land is because they ran out of ports to go to with the ship. And they had to come on land and have a place to operate out of.
People use false names, I know, to buy real estate, but usually when you're doing something like that, there's a reason most thieves rob at night. There's a reason people are sneaking around in darkness, and there's a reason you have to use false names. And they crept into Clearwater, and it's a matter of record. I mean, they went to war with the politicians. They tried to frame one of the mayors of Clearwater. That's a matter of a court record now. So they have been behaving badly in Clearwater from the day they got here. And our community knows it. Our people know it. It's an unfortunate thing.
Yeah. And actually, their behavior is dictated by their actual policy.
Right.
It's not that somebody made this up just recently. This was put down in green on white, which is how L. Ron Hubbard wrote his policy letters. The technical bulletins were red on white. In green and white, you see in there, if a person is an enemy, he can be declared fair game, where you can go and destroy him with no repercussions from the church itself. And you can make up things about him. And one of the policies says, find or manufacture data about a person. Find or manufacture. In other words, make it up. And, this is how they operate. So this is standard operating procedure. It's not anything unusual. It is the way they are.
Right.
Anyway, to continue this, How did you then get involved? I think you got involved because A&E was going to use your church for a.
Well, yeah, what happened a couple years ago, really last year, kind of came to a head. And again, it's not something we've ever been quiet about. Most Baptist pastors are going to at some point, and I guess any religious leader, you teach what you believe, you try to educate your people, and you contrast other belief systems. So that's not unusual, nothing extraordinary about that. But the Scientology makes it a little bit, more sensational, I suppose. But in 2000, I guess it was 17, I've had the privilege of getting to know Mike Render, who's done such a wonderful job on the Scientology Aftermath program with Leah Remini. And he lives here. And we kind of struck up an acquaintance. And then a plan was floated at one point to possibly have a large town hall, like live event in Clearwater with Mike and Leah. And, conversations just kind of progressed where I said, look, we would be willing to host that. I mean, we have one of the largest buildings in town, and it'd be a little bit out of the ordinary for us, but I think it would be fun, and I've encouraged them to open it up to the community, have a live event. They both know. I think if you did a live event in Clearwater, it would be standing room only. I mean, they could fill almost any building in the city, and we were going to do that. And then what happened, Ron, was in about a week or so before that was scheduled to be, I wrote a letter to our people explaining why we were going to do this. I felt like our church members needed an explanation. And I said things I've often said about Scientology, like, we're trying to host this event. I think I called them a dangerous cult. Well, that went into the paper, and, then that blog went sort of viral, I guess. I don't know what the definition of viral is, but it went wild. And so the town hall event didn't end up taking place. They ended up choosing to do something different. But that kind of threw us into the eye of the storm a little bit. And they said things about us like they always are going to do with a critic. And so that's kind of put me a little more in the public's eye about this than I had been before.
Well, when you said they're a dangerous cult, you were just speaking the truth. I mean, you can right down to it. They are a dangerous cult.
Yeah, no, I think so. I think those are tough words. I don't just mean them in an irresponsible fashion. I mean, I guess it goes to how you define cult, but those of us who are evangelical Christians have a specific definition, and our people know what I was trying to say, and I do think it's dangerous. So those are words that are tough, but I stand by them.
Well, I mean, they call themselves a church, but I will tell you, I was raised as a Catholic when I was a kid, and I can remember, and I've said this many times, I'm going to say it again. I used to go to confession, and you'd go in a little booth and confess your sins to a priest. And at the end, he would grant you forgiveness and give you some prayers to say or things to do. And you were forgiven. You'd walk out. And I remember as a little kid, after that, I felt pretty good. I thought, I'm going to try to be a better kid this week. Mm-hmm. That was a benefit to me. That was something that I could do. And I could get a little relief from, maybe man is a warlike creature and he does things that he's sorry for later. But to be able to be forgiven for them was a benefit to me.
Yeah.
I don't see what the benefit is. I know if you go and hear you preach, I'm sure people walk out of there and feel better and a little bit of relief from the hostilities and various things that go on in their life. That is a benefit.
Yeah.
So that whatever the benefit the church has, it's in their own minds. It's not in reality. I mean, that is a fact. They have a relief organization called the Volunteer Ministers, where they claim it's the largest relief organization in the world. They continually hammer people for donations to it. And then when there's a catastrophe, they say they're going to send their volunteer ministers out. And the volunteer ministers have to pay their own way. None of the money that they collected for it is used.
Yeah.
So I would like to take this up because I think this is one of the definitions of a true church, that there is a benefit to the person. And if you don't mind expanding on that, would you like to do that?
I'd love to talk about the concept of church, because the word church it's a very intentional word. That is a Christian concept. My Jewish friends wouldn't call their religious faith a church. Our Muslim friends wouldn't call their faith a church. We would acknowledge those are completely different religious systems. A church is a Christian word. It's a Bible word that refers to a gathering of followers of Jesus Christ. And over time, so church equals Christianity. Church is a Christian word. So when they use the term church, I mean, that's very intentional. And they're not a church in any stretch of the word. They may be a religious system, depending on how you define that. But I think that's a very deliberate attempt to kind of ride the wake of Christianity. One of their symbols employs a cross. And that to me is one of the things that as a Christian pastor, I take exception to. You want to call it a religion, that depends how you define religion, but you want to call it a church, then I'm going to take exception to that. Somebody told me one time, well, quit calling us a cult. I said, I'll quit calling you a cult when you quit calling yourself a church. Because it's not a church. It isn't Christian in any way, shape, or form. And it is, in fact, in many ways, the exact opposite of Christianity. So that the word church to me is a word that needs to be explored and challenged when they use that.
Okay, Willie, could you expand on when you say it's an exact opposite of that? Give me some examples of that.
Yeah, it's because it's one of the things as I study it, Ron, I think there's a lot to this. I don't think it's not, it isn't just a different religious system. I think in some ways it has taken the teachings of Jesus and the teachings of Christianity and turned it upside down. Many people know, and I'm sure many of your listeners know, and I'm sure you know, that L. Ron Hubbard, the founder of the church, had his roots in the occult. He had some experiences in what really is a satanic cult before he ever founded the Church of Scientology. Lawrence Wright writes about this in his book, Going Clear. It writes about some of the seances they did, some of the black magic that he was involved in, grotesque immorality, calling up demonic spirits, all kinds of stuff that some of your people would think was just all nonsense. But there's no question he was involved in that. As you know, the Church of Scientology's response to that today is that he was undercover for naval intelligence or something, which is utter nonsense. He certainly was involved in that. And there are a lot of people, including one of his own sons, who has said that Scientology is black magic. Now, people might think that's fanciful, but there's no question that he had experience there. And then when you look at how Scientology thinks about God, how it thinks about right and wrong, how it thinks about, Ron, every religion is trying to deal with mysteries in life. Why are we here? What's the purpose of life? What went wrong? You talked about we all struggle with sin. Yep. How do I fix what's wrong? And in some ways, if you look at the answers that Christianity gives to those questions, Scientology gives exactly the opposite answers to those questions. Scientology says you can fix yourself. Christianity says only God can fix you. Mm-hmm. Scientology says you lash out at your enemies. Jesus said, forgive your enemies. Scientology says that the great cosmic power, Xenu, is evil. He's an evil warlord. The Bible says that God is a good God, a God of love. Scientology says we're trapped. We're spiritual beings that are trapped, and we need to make ourselves become free. Christianity is we're made in the image of God. And what's wrong is that we've all sinned, and we need his forgiveness. We need his grace. So I could just go on and on and on and on. It's the exact opposite message of the message that Jesus gave. And again, one of the examples that's the clearest is one you've already referred to. Scientology says, attack your enemies, fair game.
Yeah.
Jesus was love your enemies, learn to forgive those who have mistreated you. And I think it's a powerful message even to this day that the world needs to hear, the message of Jesus. But yeah. Scientology says exactly the opposite of what Jesus said.
Boy, I'll tell you that you really expanded on this for me. I appreciate that, because I'll tell you one of the things you brought up is forgiveness. And you've read my book, and those of you who haven't, Here it is right here. It's called Ruthless Scientology, My Son David, Miscavige, and Me. At the end of the book, I actually forgive David. I don't know if you remember that.
Well, it's a powerful book, and that's a powerful story that you chose to forgive.
Yeah, and I will tell you something. Unless you do that, you can never walk away from anything. If you always hold hatred and revenge in your heart, you're doing it to yourself at that point. So you've cut yourself off for any forgiveness given to you, as long as you don't forgive somebody else. And it's a big deal as far as I'm concerned.
Somebody said bitterness is like drinking poison and hoping another person gets sick. It just makes you sick.
And that's a great statement, because you know who said that? That South African.
I think, is it Desmond Tutu who said that? It may be. I don't know who said it.
Yeah, it was Mandela. Was that the guy's name?
Oh, it was Nelson Mandela. It may have been one of those leaders.
Yeah, he said, holding hate or anger in your heart is like drinking poison and hoping the other person dies.
Right.
I'll tell you another great statement, which I love, because Mark Twain, who was one of my favorite authors, as a matter of fact, he was my favorite author.
Yeah, I love Mark Twain.
It's easier to fool someone than it is to convince them they've been fooled. And that's the problem with the Church of Scientology parishioners, or I should say the cult of Scientology, because in fact, they are a cult. They are not a church, as far as I'm concerned. There's no relief. There's no forgiveness. As a matter of fact, as it stands now, if you were to cross them or in any way, as I'm doing with this program, exposing them, you're never forgiven. In other words, like the Catholic Church has purgatory and hell. Purgatory is where you go to get ready to go to heaven. And then, but with the Church of Scientology, you go against them, you go straight to hell, and you're there forever. No forgiveness, nothing.
And you know that, to me, Ron, that is so telling, because look, every religion, I'm sure many of your viewers would not agree with my religious conviction. Every religion has detractors, has critics, have people that say, hey, we think what you believe is, or you believe Jesus rose from the dead. They might say, yeah, we think you're nuts. But it's how you respond to your critics. And it's when you, in your anger and defiance, want to silence people, want to hurt people, literally want to hurt people, want to have people fired from their jobs, want to slander people. You know what? If we have critics, we try to answer them if we think they're wrong. We try to correct them if they've made a misstatement, but I don't want to hurt them. They're not my enemy. It's like, you just go on. And I honestly think in many ways, they have hurt themselves. Scientology has hurt themselves in the broader community by how they treat their critics. It's like the worst PR plan in the world. Just quit being so mean to people, and everybody would kind of forget about it.
I tell you, Willie, you just said a mouthful. I got to tell you, and that's in simple, everyday language that anybody can understand. Because in my case, listen, I'm the father of the chairman of the board.
Yeah.
I held David in my hands as a little baby when he was stricken with asthma, and he had one hell of a time growing up as a little kid with asthmatic attacks. And this was a child I loved and I had a lot of fun with. And he played sports and we had a lot of fun together. Now, because of the acquisition of the power, it turned him from Dr. Jekyll into Mr. Hyde. And I will tell you, they bought over 500 variations of my name from GoDaddy, and every one of them will lead you to a hate site. If you were to read that hate site and think I did these things, I should have been shot a week ago. Okay.
Right.
So fortunately, I don't give one hoot as to what they say about me, because I'll continue to expose them for what they are. And the day they stop disconnection and say out loud in front of everybody, we're not a church, we're a cult, but we have some services that might help you. And one of them is to teach you to communicate a little better. That's the day I'll stop this webcast. Other than that, I'm going to keep on going.
I've often thought that, I mean, you take yourself, you take Leah Remini or Mike Render or whoever, so many you've had on here. If when those people left Scientology, if the church had just said, they call themselves Church of Scientology, just said, hey, we wish them well. We're sorry they disagree, but they have friends here forever. And those people would have probably gone on and never said a word about them. Just gone. They just wanted to go on with their life. But they've attacked them. They slander them. And now that, guys like you are speaking up, speaking out, and telling the truth about them. And it just makes you think Jesus knew what he was talking about when he said, hey, forgive your enemies and love those who persecute you, because honestly, it sets you free. And sometimes it turns an enemy into a friend when you do that.
Well, I'll tell you, you said a mouthful, because whether you believe in Christianity or what Jesus said, you can't deny that these are workable truths that he said. Whether you think he was the Son of God or not, or whatever you think, read it. And some of these things, man, they're workable. It's not baloney,
Yeah,
but
that's good advice, Ron.
As an example, when you get to the highest level in Scientology, what's called Operating Thetan 8, which is the highest level of spiritual awareness, he badmouths Jesus. He said that he was a lover of men and boys, and it just
oh, it's terrible. And most Christians have never read that, or most people have never heard it, because Scientology will say, as you know, kind of their PR brochure will say the way to happiness, which they hand out at all kinds of places, which is kind of their introductory track, will say, hey, we're for all religions. Every religion's okay. Don't criticize a person's religious beliefs. And one of the things they say, which I most often want to counter, is that you can be a Christian and a Scientologist. Well, that's just simply not true. And when you get into Scientology, there are some very, very critical things about Christianity. And as you just said, one of the things, and they deny that this is an authentic document, but several people have attested to it, is that at their highest levels, he alleges that Jesus was a pedophile.
Yep.
He certainly thinks that Jesus was not all that great. He thinks the crucifixion was a fraud. It's not a fake. It was an implant from aliens. So when Christians hear that, sometimes they're stunned that Scientology is actually saying those things about Christianity. And Ron, there are a lot of critics of Christianity. There are a lot of people who would say, Pastor, I don't agree with you. I don't think Jesus was risen from the dead. And I do. They would say, we don't agree with you. But most people in history still look at Jesus and go, oh, we can't deny that he was a great person. We can't deny that he was a great moral figure. And I say to them, hey, that's not enough. I want you to believe that he's the Son of God. But most people look at Jesus and go, wow, he is the greatest figure in human history. It's almost inarguable. But when you look at the Church of Scientology, they slander him. They don't think he was a great figure. And Christians need to know that.
You're right there. You said a mouthful. I'll tell you something. What you said about if a person left and that would be it, and they could still talk to their kids, which I've lost my family, as you know.
Absolutely.
They're disconnected from me. They're still with the church. If they would just let people go and let them speak to their friends and their family, I wouldn't be talking to you right now.
Of course. We have people leave all the time. And I think any church does, any religious group does. I mean, people leave for a variety of reasons. They no longer believe what you believe, or they get mad, somebody hurt their feelings. You just, you know what? You love people. You shake their hands. You say, I'm sorry you feel that way. You're always welcome back. You have friends here. It's the level of control and manipulation that you see that really begins to define a dangerous religious group. And that really does drive a wedge between families and friends. It's completely unnecessary.
Well, you were speaking the truth here, my friend. And I'll tell you, when they say that you can be any religion and still be a Scientologist, that's what they would say is an acceptable truth. In other words, a lie. That's what they call an acceptable truth.
Wow.
It used to be called a shore story. When the ship was going around to these different ports, they said they were training to be engineers and things. So that was the shore story.
Wow.
That is a lie.
Not the truth.
They operate on this. And if they were to hire a PR firm to sink them, they couldn't have, that firm could have not done a better job than they're doing themselves, because they're not shooting themselves with shooting themselves in the foot with a 22. They're shooting themselves in the foot with an 8-gauge shotgun. This is the result of what they do.
You're right. They are, and I don't consider them my enemy. I really don't. I consider them people that have been deceived and are trapped. I truly have sympathy for them. But no enemy could do more harm to them than they've done to themselves. They are their own worst enemy.
Well, I agree. And I'll tell you this, the older I get, the more sympathy I have for the people who are trapped there. And
I absolutely agree.
they're trapped by their own, they're mostly trapped by their own minds. Look at Willie. Is there any more you'd like to bring up about this? Because I think we've kind of covered the subject, haven't we?
Yeah, I think it's just important to see that Scientology is incompatible with a Christian worldview. It operates in a very unhealthy way. I'd like to say this, Ron. I am a strong believer in religious liberty. I believe it's one of the, as an American, I believe it's one of our key values. You can believe whatever you want to believe. You can believe the moon is made of cheese if you want to. Now, I may dispute it. I may bring facts up and say, hey, I think you're wrong. But I believe you have the right of conscience. I would defend their right to believe whatever they want to believe. But religious liberty doesn't give you the right to begin to hurt people. Religious liberty doesn't give you the right to break the law. Your liberties, I learned this in 5th grade civics. Your liberties end where someone else's begin. And so I would defend their right to believe what they want to believe. But somebody needs to stand up and say, hey, they're hurting people. They really are. They're hurting families just like your family's been impacted. And by the way, I have a right to say that too. But the religious liberty extends to me to be able to say what I want to say. So I don't consider them an enemy, but I do believe they're wrong. I do believe they're harmful. And I do believe it's a very destructive cult.
Well, I happen to agree with you 100%. And this is the reason I do what I do. And any of you who have seen this or have watched my other episodes, I would invite you to become a patron and help defray what it costs us to do this. As I say, we have no sponsor. We're doing this on our own dime. And this enables us to do anything we please and bring on people like this wonderful person I just spoke to, Willy Rice, and get a legitimate view on life and religion. I say legitimate. This is not, look at, Christianity has been around for a couple thousand years. Whether you agree with it or not, there's got to be something right with it, because if it were a complete horse manure, it would have faded away into the darkness of the dark alleys. All right. So, Willie, thank you very much. And I have one thing. My producer is signaling me.
Yeah, just one thing, Ron. Danielle Demchek sends a $5 super chat that says, "Love what you do. Keep it up. Keep rocking."
Daniel Demchek.
Yep.
Daniel Demchek. Thank you, my friend. And yes, I will keep doing what I'm doing. And I will keep having people like Willy Rice come on. These brave people come out here and open up their mouths and speak right out, go right against the grain. Takes a little bit of courage to do that. And I appreciate all of you who have ever appeared in there. And Willie, I appreciate you coming on, my friend. I really do. This has been my...
If you're back in Clearwater, come see us. And we'd love to connect sometime, Ron.
Oh, listen, when I come down there, I'm going to definitely drop by and see you. And
I'll buy lunch, man. Let's do it.
Okay. Okay, my friend. Hey, listen, thanks a lot, Willie. And
thank you, Ron.
From me and everybody else here, thank you for tuning in. See you on the next episode. Bye-bye.